My name is Anna Mandulo. I am in Sydney and I'm the founder and current president of the Filipino Food Movement Australia Incorporated.
Hello everyone, I'm Corina Reyes. I'm First Secretary and Consul based in the Embassy of the Philippines in Canberra. We think that we can call our food, our cuisine unique because we cannot actually describe it in one word. Unlike our neighbors in Southeast Asia, where you can readily say that their food is spicy, like the common food of Brunei, Indonesia, and Malaysia, and even Thai food is spicy. For the Philippines, you cannot encapsulate our food in just one word. We have a perfect term for it in Filipino. We call it malinamnam, which is more commonly understood as umami, because you cannot just say it's sour, it's sweet, or salty, or spicy. There's a deep and complex taste in our food. So that's why I think our food is unique because it cannot be encapsulated by just one flavor. It is a total experience.
I think it's unique because from all the readings and from history, we were influenced by many different cultures. 300 years of Spanish rule, there had Chinese in our history, Malays, American. So the real fusion, if you ask me, is Filipino food. But then the Filipinos back then also had indigenous produce and they were already cooking. So all these influences makes the Filipino food unique.
We think that this is brought about by our rich history. Our colonial influences brought so much on our food, our Spanish and American influences. Aside from that, even our pre-Hispanic times our country already has very close engagements with our neighbors, with the Chinese, our Southeast Asian neighbors, and that's why Islam was brought in first to the Philippines before Christianity, because we were already doing trade with our Asian neighbors. And that is to say that it's because we have a strong indigenous culture. Our indigenous communities continue to influence our cuisine up to this day. And what happens is when you have more than 7,600 islands, you really have different flavors. We don't have a national adobo, for instance. Adobo differs from one island to the next because there are many cultures that can be found, many languages that can be found in our archipelago.
My name is Fred Batalona. I'm a chef here in Melbourne. I am the owner of Barangay, a catering and Filipino pop-up restaurant here in Melbourne, where we introduce Filipino food and culture to Australians here. I think it's because it's what we use as a sharing point. I think most cultures integrate their idea of what it is to be together. It's usually during when we eat together. It's like when we make food that are specifically from our hometown, and that's how we bond. And usually with food, there's an essence of culture, and that's a very big part of it. And it rooted from how we are in the community per se. It will be part of a fiesta, part of a holiday, it'll be part of a tradition in someone's home and or someone's region. So food and culture are well intertwined, especially for any like older generations of country like the Philippines and also like the Japanese, the Koreans, even the Europeans have the same thing.
I think very traditional. Filipinos are very traditional, um, and when it comes of terms of resources, there's plenty of resources in Philippines from root crops and um, poultry and everything.
And then what make us unique for me is we turn our food into like uh, our palate, yung taste natin. And like, kumbaga, palate kasi ng Filipinos, we have this sweetness, salty, and then sometimes it's sour. So yun dun lang tayo nagbe-base, then we just make it. And then unique ang food natin because in our food, maano natin yung like the foreign influence natin, yan with mga Spanish, like meron tayong paella Valenciana, meron tayong lomi, the Chinese, meron tayong whatsoever na dishes na maano mo na talagang influensya ng mga foreign countries na nag-ano sa atin, mga ninuno natin.
But there's more to Filipino food than just Filipino food. You know, there's a lot of different flavors, a lot of influence from different countries. So it's something that you don't want to miss. I mean, I've tried different cuisine, but I mean, I don't know if I'm being biased because I'm Filipino. I've always wanted to go back to eating Filipino food because it's for me it's home. But if you compare it to other dishes, it's always very complex in the sense. There's the sour flavor, the sweet flavor, the salty flavor. So and it's something that's so unique that you have to try it.
It's good that like us, like me, kumbaga introducing our dishes in foreign countries like here in Australia, especially in mostly naman na kumbaga nakikita mo ngayon kumbaga in America and all the kumbaga may marami na rin nag-open ng mga Filipino restaurant. So that will become the starting kumbaga ano natin na makilala in over the world. And kumbaga yun yung talagang aim ko din.
Because I think for Filipinos, we are really proud of our food. In a way, we're proud of our cuisine in a way that we want our meals, our food to taste the way we have been accustomed to it. Like many Filipinos abroad would show off or would proudly talk about their grandmother's adobo or their mother's tinola. So for us, I think there is that a sense of pride in how we know or understand our food. That's probably why we wouldn't Filipinos before, the Filipino diaspora won't venture into restaurants or won't go to a restaurant serving Filipino food because they would think that the food that is cooked in their own homes is better. But here in Australia, we're seeing that unravel already. There are a lot of Filipino restaurants in Melbourne and in Sydney, the foodie capitals of this country, and we're very proud of how they are. Most of them came about during the pandemic. A lot of them became famous and really thrived during the pandemic. So we're hoping that this Filipino food movement would continue to thrive here in Australia.
I think it's great. I think with the emergence of Serai, Cariton, Sorbetes, you have Barcada here in Melbourne, and you have Cebu Lechon in Sydney. They're kind of like creating this more of a movement that's different from what we're used to. Because like these are operators that are actually well-known chefs or at least well-known operators in the industry. They're not just someone who wants to open a Filipino restaurant, and you could tell the difference. And don't get me wrong, Filipino food is amazing if it's home cooked, but it doesn't translate to an operational sense and commercially. So if you don't have the know-how on how to operate a kitchen or operate a restaurant, then it becomes just kind of like a home cooking setup where things are not on time, things are not probably cooked properly, and there's no level of care in preparation. Because like as chefs, we tend to remember that what we use as ingredients and what processes do we use and how we serve them are very important. So by the time we get to the final outcome of the food, we give you the full experience of what we're trying to sell you. And it's not just, we're just going to choose from the carinderia. And carinderias are great, but I think if they're not well done or like done properly, then people don't have the greatest experience of them. For us Filipinos, I think if I go to a carinderia, regardless of the quality, I'll feel happy because at least I know it's like Filipino food, But for non-Filipinos, they would think that our food is subpar or it's not as great. which is, it's hard to represent something when there's no actual history of good food in relation to Filipino cuisine.
I think we need to, continue the conversations. Like, it's not just cooking it and, inviting your friends. It's like going out and supporting that business and inviting your friends and create the conversations because it's gonna start from us. I keep saying that all these chefs who are popular now because they're highlighting Filipino food, all these restaurants, it's not just their role, it's the community's role to build it. If we want this to be
Yolk
bigger
to
than
eggshells. So I used
it
two eggs in
already
here and
is,
just put it directly into the
then
mixing bowl.
we have to play our part. Not just let's not rely on the big names or brands or organizations to do this. The community will have to step in. We have to be. It has to be collective.
Yeah, for me, kumbaga, masaya ako dahil, kumbaga, maraming Pilipino now has been stand up na maging businessman or to venture into restaurant na siyempre, we are all parang ambassador tayo, ambassador on our country which is Philippines. Kumbaga, ambassador tayo on our food. Kumbaga, nagre-reflect doon yung culture natin. And then, may showcase natin na ng our food is very, kumbaga, naman talaga, very worth trying for na matikman ng ibang not only our kababayan but of course sa ibang mga kumbaga mga Aussies dito sa Australia as well. And then kumbaga masaya ako kasi marami na, and then kumbaga mas marami mas maganda para just like other kumbaga nationalities like Chinese, kahit magkakatabi sila o something, kumbaga marami pa rin nagpupunta because kilala na yung food nila. And then of course Filipino, just like here in Bendigo, just only one, kumbaga two store lang dito yung restaurant ko. And then kumbaga nakikilala na nila ang Filipino food through my restaurant, and then marami namang repeaters na mga OC to really try our food. They just love it, like especially the soup, the lomi or something. So yun.
Well, I think malaking influence yung tourism eh. So most ng mga customers namin na locals and even yung mga like mga Asians, other Asian customers, like pumupunta sila sa restaurants because nagpunta na sa Philippines or nakapunta na sa Philippines or they're planning to go to Philippines. So I think importante yung tourism. Well, Japan is very popular. Japanese dish in particular. It's because, I mean, lahat ng tao, they go to Japan for holiday. Even Bali, even, China. So I think malaking influence ang tourism sa food. So I suppose pag naging like okay yung tourism sa country natin and mas maraming tao nagvi-visit, mas marami rin yung maghahanap ng Filipino dish. So for me, that's important.
We are still starting. When I got here in Australia 4.5 years ago, we didn't have that much yet. Well, I'm based in Canberra. We don't have much Filipino restaurants. But even just 2 years ago with the pandemic, some of the restaurants just came out here in Canberra during that time. So I think we're still on the starting line in as far as mainstreaming our food is concerned. Chinese, Japanese, Thai food restaurants were there for a long time already, and were able to develop their brand in terms of food. We're just lucky that Australians are very, we can call them global citizens. They appreciate international cuisine, so we're quite confident that we'll get there. Hoping that other restaurants, not necessarily Filipino restaurants, will adopt some of our food, some of our flavors, like There's a dessert place here in Canberra. I think they have a similar chain in Sydney that, for
But I
example,
found an easy
they had
way
ube
to
ice
do it,
cream.
which is to
So
just
they're not
torch
necessarily a Filipino
the
restaurant,
coconut flesh
but because of
inside.
the growing influence of ube, we had an ube explosion 2 years ago. They started to adopt our flavors as well.
Well, I think it's important na you have communities that support you. So that's one thing. There's a community here, the Filipino Food Movement Australia, which is very supportive sa mga Filipino restaurants. So that's one thing. They do have like pop-up dinner every season
The
to
coconut
sort of
flesh.
educate
Yeah.
locals and other people regarding Filipino food. So, yung influence ng other people sa lahat ng tao, I think that's important. So, support group, I suppose.
As a Filipino chef here in Australia, of course, I just want that everybody will find our Filipino dish na makakatatak sa kakaiba ang Filipino dish. Kumbaga, babalik-balikan talaga nila. So, I'm gonna make sure na talagang, kumbaga, kung whatever kung anong meron tayo sa Pilipinas is they gonna have it here in Australia, the authenticity of the food itself. And of course, we need to make na maano nila na yung taste, it will be taste, yung color, yung ng food natin, may showcase ng maganda.
Put it directly into your mixing bowl, and in a separate mixing bowl,
I think I want them to see how amazing it is, because like our food is similar to all Southeast Asian food. They're flavorful, they're fragrant, they're full on. But the thing is, like in terms of balance of how our food is really rich. So I want them to know how good our food is. Like how amazing, and how you could technically say, oh, okay, they're kind of like the same as every other Southeast Asian food elsewhere. They're not bad. And I think it's through storytelling and also like imparting them some of the history of how our food became to happen, or like what it is. Like, for example, adobo. Adobos are very good like first representation of what we can do as Filipino food, because it can be sweet, sour, salty, savory, and it could be any kind of protein, vegetables you want it to be. So that's kind of like a flavor bomb in a simplistic way, whereas you don't have to do so many things. And if you use it as a catalyst for like how our food is, it's just like you will have a fiesta in your mouth. And I think that's something that I want people to know, that when you eat Filipino food, it's just a full-on orgasm going around in that mouth, and that the flavors will just literally penetrate you. And that's very
Flavor.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get pressing.
You can add the water in there. Okay. Normally you would use warm water just so there's two pressings that you do. So the first one,
we're here for that, actually, to promote Filipino culture, to promote our ties with Australia. For us, we make it a point for the embassy to always serve Filipino food in the events that the ambassador hosts, and we do that by working with the Filipino restaurants and chefs who are here, who are based here in Canberra, and even those from outside of state. We work with, as I've mentioned earlier,
normally is
there's a Melbourne-based group, Entre Pinay, so we work with them in some of our events. In Sydney, the Filipino Food Movement Australia, we have also worked with them. So we are very cognizant of the local talent that is available in Australia, because they know and they understand better the Australian palate. So we try to work with them to make sure that we introduce our food to them. We have several events throughout the year. Filipino Food Month, Independence Day, and of course Pasko, Christmas, a very big Filipino event where we always feature and highlight our food. We are happy that Woolworths is a big partner. They have over 200 Woolworths stores feature Filipino ingredients on their shelves. So we hope that with over 400,000 Filipinos in Australia and a growing base of Australian foodies and enthusiasts, more food will be available in the mainstream.
Okie dokie. So we've got chicken here. It's a whole chicken, about 1.7 to 1.8 kilos. So we're going to be marinating it in a little bit of soy sauce and
I
calamansi.
think it's because we lack because Filipinos as a culture in different countries, we like to assimilate ourselves. So the moment we go to a country, we try to allow ourselves to be part of the crowd or be Australians or follow the culture's way. So that way we don't tend to rub them the wrong way. Whereas like Chinese and other national like Thai, Vietnamese, they don't care. This is our food. This is how we are. You're gonna eat it. Even their menus are like in Thai and Thai, Vietnamese. It's hard to pronounce. Like our food is actually not hard to pronounce, but we tend to whitewash some of our things so that people can eat our food and they could try it. But I think it's just the confidence to say this is who we are, this is what we represent, and you're gonna like it. We're afraid of rejection, and I think most everyone is, but you can't go forward without trying to fail, without trying to not allow people to say bad things about you, because that's how you improve. And I think with the other nationals, they're just not afraid, and they have they have better support systems as well. I think that our community kind of lacks in a sense. We support our own kind for a time being, but if they're not good, we're the worst critics. We're like so bad that we would say, oh, this is not food I can cook at home, and without being mindful that that kind of comment will destroy a business and will not allow it to improve further. Whereas if you say, you go to the restaurant owner or you give a actual criticism that's not bad, just to help them improve, and that's the only way we can actually create more of this community. And with Serai opening, with Vicariton setting up that standard, people are aspiring on that as well, and we're doing the same thing. So that way we just create that kind of level of, okay, this is how we should represent ourselves, and that's like a guideline. Because in the end of the day, if someone wants to do this, or someone wants to create something Filipino, they're able to look at what we have on the market and say, okay, maybe I could do that and follow the footsteps. So that way we can open up 10 different Filipino restaurants. Doesn't matter, because in the end of the day, people will want to eat something different, and there's not much Filipino restaurants anyways.
You know what? It's interesting because when we first came together, a group of us, to form the movement, we all had that thought that why is it that there's a Thai restaurant in every corner in every suburb in Sydney, whereas we are the third. We used to be the third largest market group. Now we're the fifth, and why is that? So that's a question. I think because Filipinos love to cook at home, and you you'll go out. A lot of the older generations, I'm not generally, I'm not generalizing, but older generations will go out and eat the restaurant. There's always that, but I can do a better job. But this is not the way I make, or my tita makes this better, or. Whereas you see other cultures like Malaysians, you see them eating at a Malaysian restaurant, bringing their friends, Chinese, they support. I think there's a lack, maybe, of supporting the local businesses, or maybe we don't have that much businesses yet, to gain traction. It's not enough to make noise within the community. We have to go out of that. In most of our events, we support all the Filipino food businesses, but we try to create events outside of the majority where the Filipinos are, like in Sydney. It's in Western Sydney. We try to do our pop-ups outside of that community because we already know Filipinos are going to support the businesses that are existing there. But we want to get out of that. We want to promote Filipino food with people who are not Filipino. I mean, if we try to encourage people, Filipinos, so if you can attend an event, bring a friend. If we have picnics, bring a friend so that they can taste. Invite your office mates. We have to get out of that circle.
Because today we are making mini ube pavlovas with passion fruit curd. Now, Rejoice, where do we start? I mean, we've got pavlovas and they've got ube in it. What's the first ingredient? So to do our pavlova, we need 6 egg whites.
As I've been a chef here in Melbourne for quite a long time now. I've been here for 8 years. And during my time, as I progressed with my career, I wanted to be originally a certified pastry chef, which I became pastry chef regardless. Did that for a few years. And among the time that I've been working with people that are not Filipino, they always ask me where are the good Filipino places to eat in. And as I progress and progress to a head chef position where I create menus, I always wanted to impart some of my culture into it. So I'll use adobo sauce, or I'll use something Filipino like something sweetened bananas, or actually use corn in desserts. Those are things that are kind of like a mixture of what we do. And then along the way, COVID happened. We all know everything shut down. So during that time, I had enough time to reflect and think of what I want to move forward with as a chef, and if I want to open something. And to me, that was what would I represent that would be good. Because for me, the reason why I did barangay is for me to allow myself to cook something that I would want to eat, that I would want to remember of home by. Because sometimes whenever I feel like kind of not in the right funk, I would usually start cooking, and that's my safe space. And if I feel homesick and I want to go back to the Philippines, I would just cook something that's reminding me of home. Most commonly, I would do like arroz caldo, because that's something that's really warm, and it just fills you up nicely. And I thought barangay would be a good extension of that, where I'm able to recreate any cuisine that's Filipino in every single region that I can think of, and then pair it with something that's inspired by Filipino. Like for the drinks, we do cocktails that are inspired by Filipino flavors and regions and all those things. So that's my go-to, and that's the reason why I did barangay.
Our food is really delicious. I mean, we eat it every day. We love it. And right now, there's a lot of noise in the Philippines actually about the culinary movement. A lot of farmers now actually focusing on reviving, produce that aren't really popular. And a lot of restaurants are actually focusing on Filipino ingredients, indigenous ingredients of Philippines, and fine dining restaurants in the Philippines are serving Filipino food inspired. And it doesn't have to be really, the way that it was made before. Food evolves. We have different ingredients, we have different locations. So let's support these Filipino food businesses. I think it's the only way that the community can, add and contribute if we want the Filipino culinary heritage here in Australia to celebrate it. We have to do it collectively, together. That's the only way. So if there's a Filipino restaurant near you, go dine there. I mean, if everybody has their own version of it. But supporting Filipino businesses, small businesses, is the way that the economy will grow. And as a community, we grow as well.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's it. Thank you.
That's it.